was awesome.
I loved it.
I just can't believe that the whole thing was in the cabaret.
It was very well done.
Once upon a time,
when he is fat, I will eat him.
She fell down, lifeless on the ground.
there was once an old castle.
And they lived.
My name is Josh Hamlin. I'm the Assistant Director of the Campus Center. I serve as the advisor to the program committee and to the overall program, as well as, I guess you would call it the executive producer.
I am Katie Williams. I am a senior theater studies creative producing major, and I was the creative director on this project. And I'm also the cabaret coordinator.
My name is Katie Lohman, and I was the marketing coordinator for the Haunted House last year as well as this year. I work in the Campus Center.
My name is Patrick Sheehy. I'm a cabaret tech as well as an operations assistant. And during the Haunted House, I was the playwright as well as one of the many techs that were involved.
The idea developed last year with the former cabaret coordinator and I, just kind of having a lightning in a bottle moment of an event that we wanted to put together. And it really came out as the Haunted House, and to showcase what the cabaret could be capable of if used in a very extreme circumstance or set of situations.
Last year, the theme was a haunted asylum. So it was, you know, everything you could imagine an asylum would be.
You progressed through a series of isolation wards and therapy rooms where the patients had broken out. So it was during a lockdown period. And they've kind of assumed the roles of the therapist in some of these scenarios, and a lot of the doctors were then put into the patient's perspective.
And overall, I think it was a great experience. It went off really well. We had, I believe, about 250 people over the course of maybe 2.5 hours. We had maybe about 5 or 6 technical breaks. But otherwise, it was a great learning experience and a great way for us to get a foothold and then launch this project from there.
This year's theme was And They Lived, a grim horror attraction.
Based on the more traditional and original versions of the Grimm's fairy tales. So groups were brought in and they enter the story quite literally. So they actually come in and are led through the pages of storybooks. And then they would progress from one story to the next.
This year's theme was more fantastical than last year's, which gave us a lot more wiggle room with what we could do.
We wanted to do something that had an existing story already and sort of build on that, twist it, and make it really creepy.
After the theme was chosen, planning basically happened. You know, we kind of divided up the different people who are working on different parts of the project. We would meet every week and reconnect and make sure we were still on track.
Scenic, what type of costuming, what type of lighting, what special effects would be needed, how many actors, and then we kind of kept progressing along that line until we narrowed it down to 10 attractions that we pretty much knew that we could pull off.
Little Reb sort of became our thread, our story thread throughout the entire Haunted House. You see her at the beginning, and you see her in the middle, and you see her at the end as well.
I would say the different challenges were just, well, one of the major challenges for me was just having the time to meet up as a group and actually talk in person. I know I had trouble making the meeting times because there was a lot of us who, you know, just couldn't be all together at the same time.
One of my, big responsibilities is making sure that the scope and the ideas, as grand as they are actually executable in terms of not only within the budget and the physical constraints of the space, but also in terms of liability for the college and the actors and the participants who are going to be involved, to make sure that there's a certain level of safety that's considered.
First, the time we only had 3 days in the space to create an entirely new space in there, and we had a very limited budget, so being able to be creative within that budget was difficult but a fun challenge to have. And we didn't have any huge major challenges. I know last year we had a hurricane happen. Luckily we didn't have anything crazy like that happen this year, but so it was a fairly smooth process overall, nothing too challenging.
Setup actually begins weeks in advance when we're collecting props and costume pieces and trying to lay out how we want to approach the day.
First off, how it works is we have a 3-day reservation in the cabaret.
We started on Monday by getting a truck and going down to Southie and going to the prop warehouse and picking up all of our props and set pieces. And then going to Home Depot, picking up all the black plastic sheeting that we needed.
We do a truck rental and a pickup, bring those all into the space along with all of our other supplies.
Tuesday we came back and load-in happened.
First thing that usually gets done is they go in, they tape down the floor before the walls go. And by doing this, we figure out where everything is.
Taking our drawings of how each of the pathways and rooms are going to be laid out within the room and taping the floors so that way we have like kind of a one-to-one, and then making any adjustments. So if there's a question of pathway safety, for example, we had to reconfigure the maze, the forest maze segment, just to make it a little bit more user-friendly or participant-friendly. We have people who are working on scenic elements, doing painting, construction. We have a group of people who are doing the walls, which is our heavy duty grade industrial plastic. So they're measuring and cutting each one to to meet the specifics of the floor plans and getting those where they need to be.
And the walls took the most time.
We built the big plastic walls by putting them up on all the pipe and starting that process. We went to the costume shop, we grabbed all of the costumes, as many as we could from there, hoping that they would fit our actors because we hadn't had a costume fitting yet. And we took that all and we got it all in the space on Tuesday, and by Wednesday we had a good majority of that done by Wednesday night. Mostly Wednesday was concentrated on getting all the walls up, getting all of the rooms decorating, getting all of the lights focused.
We're dressing up the lobby at this point with our storybook pages, as well as sealing it off so that people can't see what's happening ahead of the event. Finishing up walls still. And then eventually we got to the event itself.
So it's a very labor-intensive process that goes over the course of roughly 2.5 days, right up until we're almost ready to open the doors.
Where we ran and scared people.
So we have groups of approximately 4 to 6 students. They're all, we have our queue in a line up in the lobby.
Upstairs wasn't really anything special. It was just stanchions leading to an elevator.
They are then brought in down the elevator. They're brought down by one of our narrating staff.
And once you get out, you see all these pages with just writing all over them. And
Red kind of like leads them in, and they follow her.
the stories sort of get darker physically, and the text on them starts to get darker and scarier. And by the time you get to the entrance doors of the cabaret, it's all ripped up and bloodied, and you know something terrible is going to happen. So Red Riding Hood disappears, and you walk through the forest, and you enter the forest. You walk through, and you open the door, and you see Hansel and Gretel inside the witch's cottage,
where she is baking and boiling Hansel and Gretel.
And the witch is rolling out Gretel like she's going to be baked into a pie.
Hansel, my friend Danny, is being boiled alive in this gelatinous substance inside of a cauldron that's supposed to be water.
There's all kinds of fun odds and ends and little touches to the room.
So you walk down, you keep walking through the hallway, and you see one of the ugly stepsisters from Cinderella, and she's cutting off her heel.
There's a lot of distress there on their part in terms of, playing up the aspects of why they always choose them.
Keep walking, and you get into Rumpelstiltskin's room.
Caroline, Lacey, and Paul Amita doing Rumpelstiltskin.
We did a little twist on it where Rumpelstiltskin has taken the maiden, and instead of having her spin straw into gold, he's actually spinning her hair into gold.
She's have the most beautiful hair you've ever seen.
The next scene is Rapunzel's tower, where we have Rapunzel's prince, who is kind of wandering, who's been blinded by the thorn bushes that he has fallen upon. Again, that's a very traditional aspect of the story that most modern versions of it don't include.
Then walk by, and you see Rapunzel hanging from her hair as she billows in the wind.
This was an incredibly cool visual effect that was achieved by the effects of Jody Steele, who's an artist at Emerson. She made a 3D floor graphic to go along with the dimensions of the tower that we had built.
They then progress into the forest maze, which we left as a very dark in room. The only effect we have is a strobe, very slow rhythmic strobe light.
Every once in a while you get a glimpse of light to be able to see where you're going.
There's a lot of scare aspects and elements, a lot of branches and things that are brushing up against them, as well as creatures that we've kind of hidden in there. And at the very end of that, they encounter Red Riding Hood again.
Saying, come on, we have to go to Granny's house. And then she's like skipping.
A wolf pops out and grabs her and pulls her back into his cave and lair.
And kind of scares them on into the next section, which is Snow White.
Snow White is like blue on the ground, and then suddenly a witch offers you an apple.
You're walking through and you get to another room again. But this time it's Geppetto, Pinocchio's room. But Geppetto is the puppet now. His tendons have been ripped out of his arms and he's strung up.
These long pieces of rope that were like surrounded by skin-like fibers.
And we have the workshop with lots of other puppets and strings and the wood carving elements. And as the group moves through that room, Pinocchio then drops from the ceiling, brandishing a bloody knife, and hopefully scares them into the next room.
Grandmother's room, you realize grandmother is not the one in the bed, but the wolf is the one in the bed and he's eating grandmother.
We have a giant bubble stomach where you can see the shadows of the grandmother inside, and you can hear her trying to get her way out.
Finally, we came to the lumberjack, which was the last jump scare, and then last scare overall.
There's a creepy horse thing.
He's brandishing a bloodied axe in the head of Red Riding Hood.
You walk out and they lived.
It was really scary.
I was too scared to open my eyes.
I loved it. I like scary things, and being like terrified psychologically is great.
Yeah, that was my favorite part, that it was more psychological than like jumping out at you.
Yeah, I'm still terrified right now. Like my heart's like beating like crazy.
Well, I'm the one that screamed the most, and I think it was just because like each scene was really realistic. I'm kind of shaking right now.
I thought it was very, very well done. I'm not a scared person. I don't usually get scared, but that one really terrified me.
Yeah, it was really well done. Everything was on point. The fairy tales were awesome.
I loved it. It looked like it took a lot of effort to go into making it, all the costumes and such.
My favorite room was probably the Rapunzel hanging herself.
The strobe lights were pretty great too, because you didn't know where you were, so that was probably one of the best parts as well.
Yeah, I think the strobe lights were the coolest effect. It really made it really spooky.
Yeah, I liked the Rapunzel in the Pinocchio room. I also liked the wolf thing on the bed, and when he closed the book, that was pretty scary.
The wolf with the pregnant belly.
I liked Rapunzel, and I also liked the wolf that ate the guy. That freaked me out. Geppetto.
I liked, wait, is that the Pinocchio?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I like Pinocchio and I like Rapunzel.
The big bad wolf with grandma.
Oh, that was so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely the Pinocchio one with Geppetto and that weird red intestine kind of thing.
The wolf and the Red Riding Hood in the stomach.
Yeah.
Chills.
I didn't have a favorite room, but there was actually like an actor who like followed behind us, and whenever something like scary would come up, she'd like scare you from behind, and like you weren't prepared for it. I thought that was really creative.
And breakdowns about 2.5 hours, which is also really fun to kind of see that even though we've put all this work into it, we've done it in such a way that it's almost you pull a couple chords and the whole thing comes down, which is very awesome to see.
I think this was incredibly successful. I think the fact that we got 300 people through in 3 hours is an amazing feat. And I think because one of our original goals was to be able to provide an alternative Halloween event for the student body, and we were able to get that many people through in that amount of time, I think is extremely successful.
I definitely feel like it was successful. I think we pulled off bigger and more theatrical attractions within the actual haunted house. And we got more students through, so I think that's a pretty measurable sign of success too.
Also just the entirety of the collaboration. I mean, between the works of everyone in the campus center, artists like Jody Steele, the makeup artists, all of the collaboration that went into this, especially even some of the more technical aspects such as Jody's 3D painting, the rigging of Pinocchio, all of those came together to help contribute to this overall attraction of the haunted house, and it worked extraordinarily well.
From the student affairs side of me, again, seeing students go through the planning, construction, execution, and just the follow-up afterwards of an event of this scale and scope is very rewarding. Seeing how they are able to learn something different and apply some of the skills that they've learned, whether it's they're coming from a theater background or a writing background, and in taking those again, those skills and that knowledge that they have, and applying it in a way that's very different from what we typically would see on campus.
I think this event was also successful because we were able to do it bigger and better than we did last year. We did great things last year, and I think this year we just completely raised the bar. We took everything we knew, we put it to the side and did everything even better.
We see a lot of theatrical events, we see a lot of stories and scripts, but seeing it in a way that really transforms the space, or really transforms what an event can be or could be, is very rewarding. And I love being part of that and helping to kind of guide the students through that process, and giving them any kind of feedback that I can, in letting them, using me as a resource to say, all right, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Or have you tried this approach, because it's challenging their conceptions for something new. It's always fun.
I don't know. I think next year it's going to be really hard to beat this year. I think we really raised the theatricality of it, and I think next year they need to take it in a completely different direction than we did this year. I think if they try to sort of copy and do what we did and do it better, I don't know if it will be as successful, but I think if they sort of take what they've learned about the haunted house, how we do it, and sort of throw it out the window a little bit and rethink everything, I think it will be extremely successful.
I see this evolving, because now for 2 years in a row we've done the same concept of a haunted house where there's a path, you follow it through the dimly lit areas, you get scared.
And I mean, we're already talking about trying to do something in the spring, so not only is this a once a year event, this is turning into something we're doing even in the spring semester. So even though it's not the same event, we're talking about doing something like it. So it's expanded to more than just an annual event, which is cool.
We have just started talking about next year. We probably won't get really fully into the planning aspects of the haunted house for the until the late spring, but we already have started looking at some of the what worked, what didn't work, what have we learned from this year, from last year, and how can we continue to really push the space and push the envelope of what these events can be. We do have a few ideas on what we want to do, but I can't spoil those now.